The stories in this video are the experiences of Reddit user crazyturtlemama, who has very kindly given me permission to narrate them. Story 1. The Evil That Lives Here. My story is true, believe it or not. My name is Brandy, I am 56, and I live in Washington now. All these years my kids wanted me to write down events that happened to myself and my loved ones. Quite a few members of my family have recently passed away, leaving so many untold stories, so I don't want these experiences to die with me. So, for my children, here it goes. A lot of messed up and supernatural things have happened to us in our lifetime, most with witnesses. This is one of them. About 27 years ago, while house hunting for a rental, I met the former renter of this run-down but livable house. She warned me not to live in this house because I have small children, and not only was it run down, it was very haunted. And never, she was stern, never let a man live here with you, because he will be taken over by the evil that lives here. Now, I'm thinking she is crazy or she was just mad at the landlord for something. We needed a home desperately. I was also thinking that we have lived through worse and houses could always be cleansed. So, I blew it off. I ended up renting the house, but I soon realized that I should have heeded her warning. The house was musty and old, made of wood. The walls, the ceiling and floors were all wood. Even the bedroom doors blended in with the walls, but the bedrooms were painted on the other side. There were French doors all along the front of the house going into an enclosed but open-viewed screen porch with a front door. The main living space was long and open. The living and dining area were stretched into one long room, and it was always cold despite having the heater on, and it being in the desert. It was located on the high desert of California, on the corner of an acre lot of barren desert, and across the street there was a popular grocery store and a few small shops, too far for anyone to hear us. It served as a town hall back in the day, and I think a turkey ranch before that. It was 6 a.m., and we had planned a 3-day trip to the happiest place in the world, Disneyland. My kids, Michael age 1, Penny age 4, and Ginny age 3, were all sleeping on my bed in our bedroom at the other end of the house, so I could pack in peace for the trip in the dining room and not wake them. But I could see the bedroom door, and it was closed, and I was standing up folding clothes at the table. My boyfriend's mother, Opal, was sitting across from me when we heard the bedroom door creak open slightly. We both looked up, and it was my daughter, Ginny, in her pink and white flowered onesie. I said, "Ginny, now you know it's too early. Go back to bed." And she said, "Me up now, Mummy," in her sweet little voice. It made us both chuckle, and I told Opal that I thought she was just excited. I said, "No, baby, we're not going now, so please go back to bed." She stomped her foot, which we could feel vibrate through the floorboards. Opal then told me, "You better go put her back to bed," and I agreed. As I am making that long walk towards her, I am keeping eye contact. As I am walking, I tell her, "No, baby," and once again she stomps her foot, smiles and says louder, "Me up," with the sweetest smile, and she tilted her head. Opal even muttered, "Aw." It didn't dawn on me at the time how perfect her little pigtails were. At this point, I am extending my hands toward her. But that smile, though. I get about 6 inches from touching her, and all of a sudden she turned black and disappeared, almost like sand falling into the ground, followed by the door quickly closing behind her. Opal had a surprise response. "What the hell?" Shocked, I stood there with my hands still extended, and then the fear came all over my body, like hot and cold needles. My kids were all sleeping behind that door. I grabbed the handle and swung open the door, fearing the worst. only to find my little Ginny fast asleep with her sister's leg over her. It couldn't have been her. Although unsettling, Opal and I didn't talk about what happened, and later that morning we all piled in the wagon and went on our trip. We had a great time. But when we came home, we were met with all of the lights on and old music playing loud coming from inside. People were standing around in my living room. 2 separate groups, like 2 different periods of time. I turned to my boyfriend and asked how these people got in, and if he left the door unlocked. He told me, "No, why the hell would I do that? You saw me lock it." We all got out of the wagon and cautiously approached the front door. As I got closer, I could see a couch not where our couch was, with a man in a white tank top sitting there. He was dirty, and he was looking at this boy standing in the corner with such hatred. You could tell the boy was abused by the way he was standing there with his head down. That's when he looked up at me, and it pierced my soul even now thinking about him. The kids were scared and the dog was growling. I grabbed the doorknob to put my key in. Just then, the music stopped and the lights went out. We opened the door and nothing had been moved and no one was there. I couldn't get the image of that sad-looking little boy I saw standing there out of my mind, and it was a while before I saw him again. It was a nice day. My boyfriend and his mother were still at a doctor's appointment, and the kids and I were out grocery shopping having a good time. I usually kept the living room light on when I knew we were going to get home after dark. I didn't realize we would be gone that long, and it was just starting to be dusk. I pulled into the gate, and I think the kids were a little too rambunctious. Too much spare change quarter machine candy, I guess. I sat for a moment planning my attack with getting all these groceries, a sleeping baby, and the 2 girls up the steps and into the house, when I noticed movement in the living room. No one was home. I could hardly see anything in there because the light wasn't on. I started to get out when the girls jumped out of the car and started running for the steps. "Stop!" I yelled and ran over to them. We could hear noises like a child running around, and my eldest daughter to this day says she saw a little boy and describes him to a T. At that moment, I thought it might be an intruder or something. 3 steps went up to a landing, a locked front door opening into a window-screened-in porch, then the 3 French doors. I told the kids to go to the car, but they were too scared to leave my side, both of them clutching the back of my shirt. I armed myself with a big stick by the landing and forged through. I burst through the front door to the porch, and he was there, his face with his 2 hands cupped against the glass as if he was peering out. And then he vanished. It was the boy I saw standing in the corner that day. We went inside, and I searched every room with my obviously frightened children practically attached to my side. There was no one there. Was my mind playing tricks on me, and was I projecting my fear onto the girls? I turned on all the lights and ran out to get my sleeping baby and the rest of the groceries out of the car, when I stopped in my tracks. There, on the glass, were 2 crescent moon handprints, and it was fogged up where his nose was. It stayed there for at least 20 minutes. Let me add my thoughts here. I don't feel we always need words to communicate with them, or for them to get a message to us. They are not bound by flesh. It is important that you have an open mind, and always keep your will strong. At night, you could look out the French doors at the stores across the street and see the vast desert behind them. The property was pitch black, so you saw the reflection of yourself and whatever was behind you. That night, everyone was asleep. It was near Christmas, so I was admiring the lights decorating the storefronts, when I felt one of my children through the floorboards skip up next to me, and I heard a faint giggle. I felt a tug on my shirt, So I turned my gaze to the reflection, extending my arm over as if to caress the back of his head and pull him next to me. It didn't hit me. This wasn't my child. He came in under my arm and stood there looking up at me, and all I could feel was love and sorrow. I turned to look at him, but he was gone. So I looked back to his reflection, and it was gone as well. He was about 7 or 8 years old. He had what looked like black and white Converse on, and was wearing old jeans with rolled-up cuffs. I could see the edge of a white t-shirt under a light grey sweatshirt, and his hair was sandy blonde and wisped to the side with the sweetest smile. In that moment, I felt everything, and cried. I saw images of abuse I do not want to elaborate on, and he made me feel that the man was not his father, and that he loved the comfort of our presence. So many emotions. I went to bed and held my kids tight. I was so full of questions like, what happened to his mum? How did he die? I looked for records and was told that back in the day, there were not many records kept out there in the desert. A person could live and die, and no one would know unless it was reported. I felt whatever else that was in the house was evil, and we found out just how evil it was the longer we lived there. I feel I should describe the bedroom so you can get a feel of the surroundings. On one side of the room there was my full-size bed against the wall, and a single bed next to me against the other wall, separated by a small nightstand with a lamp where my 2 little girls slept. The door to the living room next to their bed, and on our feet, was the hall door and closet. Many nights we would see the light beneath the door get blocked out as if someone was walking up to my room just standing there, then fade away. At first we thought it was Opal going to the bathroom since it was right next to our room, but we found out later that it wasn't her because she was frail and had to use a potty chair in her room. The dog would sometimes growl and scratch, but when we opened the door to the hall, there was no one there. Almost every morning at 6 a.m. we could hear the lid of the toilet slam up and the toilet flush, but when we ran in there, the lid was down and the water was calm. A phone would start ringing in my room despite us not even having one, and we could hear old music coming from the walls from time to time. At first, we thought it was coming from the pipes of our neighbour or something, but we didn't have any neighbours because the lady had already moved out, and that house was completely empty. So many things happened there, but this night in particular caused me to never let my girls sleep in their own bed alone. The girls were so happy that day. They both received a package from my mum full of princess stuff: toys, cups and bowls, 2 beach towels, and 2 nightgowns embossed with their favourite princess images. The nightgowns were short and silky, and after their bath they begged to wear them to bed, so I happily complied. It was quiet in the house that night. Opal was with family along with my boyfriend, and I don't remember where the dog was, but he wasn't there. I tucked them in, the oldest by the wall, and the youngest closest to me on the outside. I wasn't ready for sleep, so I put a scarf over the lamp to dim the light so I could still read. Now, I am sitting on my bed next to them, and as I am reading, the covers slightly came down off of the girls. I didn't think anything of this because my oldest daughter was notorious for kicking off the blankets, so I tucked them both in and continued reading. It happened again, and once I covered them up, at this point I was feeling uneasy, and the hairs on my arms were starting to raise. Never a good sign. I looked at my oldest daughter and noticed that she hadn't moved. How was this happening? I sat back down on my bed and pretended to read intently, staring at the covers of the book pages, feeling my heart pounding through my chest. Moments passed, and I felt myself trembling, trying to hold the book steady. And then it happened. I saw the covers start to move, but the girls were still. I was confused. I didn't understand what was going on. The covers were then pulled down with force, so I leaped up and grabbed the covers from the end of the bed, pulling them up. At this point, I was standing next to them and my voice started to quiver as I firmly yelled, "Stay away from my girls!" I still don't know who I was yelling at. I sat on the bed next to them, gripping the covers tight, when they were jerked from my hands down to the foot of the bed, exposing my girl's legs. And my youngest daughter's nightgown started to rise up to the top of her thigh. She started to scream and grab at her leg, as if she was in pain, waking her sister. I threw my body over both of my girls and screamed, "Get out and leave us alone," repeatedly. I tried my best to calm the girls down and protect them. We stayed huddled together all night. That was the last time they slept alone in that house. I was able to get a bigger bed, and we all slept together from that point on. I don't have any photographic evidence, but my youngest daughter had large red marks going up her leg to her thigh. I bet you're wondering why we didn't just leave. Believe me, I wanted to, but I felt trapped. Not just by the house, but also by my boyfriend. Let me start by saying that Bill was not the nicest man. Oh yeah, from the outside he was great. He had a charming voice, and he made people laugh. Nobody thought he was capable of doing the things he did. They didn't know him like I did. I feel like he tricked me when we first got together. I was young and impressionable. He knew I had low self-esteem, so he made me feel like I wasn't good enough for anyone else, and was lucky to have him. And we had children together. I knew what he was capable of, and let's just say I didn't want to lose anyone I loved. So that's why I didn't leave him. But this was different. This was not him. This was a whole other evil. I started noticing a shift in him the longer we lived there. We stopped going out as a family, and he stopped working. He put bars on the windows and one-way locks on all the doors with only one key. I felt trapped. Not even his mother cared. She would go into her bedroom and shut the door so she didn't have to hear me scream, or our children cry when he sometimes hit me. And like always, he made me feel like it was my fault. Living there changed him though. The things he started to do were out of his character that made me more uncomfortable. He started watching me from dark rooms and behind cracks in doors. When I asked him why he was doing this, he got mad and made me feel like I was crazy. When we were alone in that house, I felt like it was even more intense. One such night, the kids were at my mother's, and we had just finished dinner. We were sitting together on the couch watching TV. I was mending a sock, and it had been a pretty good day. I noticed a change in the atmosphere, and for some reason, he seemed to have gone quiet. I was just about to ask him if he wanted me to change the channel, when a small flash of light hit my right eye. It wasn't until shortly after trying to find the source I realized. He was staring at me the whole time through a little piece of broken mirror in his right hand, hidden by the throw cover. My God, those eyes. Those eyes weren't his. I know him. This was not my person sitting next to me, and I was frightened to the core. He didn't even realize I saw this, so I sprung up. His mum had a phone installed, so I'm going to call my mother and check on the kids. He jumped and hid the mirror in the couch cushions and started trying to reason with me as to why I should come back and sit down next to him and not call my mum. It didn't like her. I noticed that while he was talking, he wasn't even looking at me. He was looking behind my head, almost like he was looking through me. I glanced at my reflection in the glass door, but nothing was behind me. I grabbed the phone and called my mother, assuring him I was only going to be a minute. We stayed on the phone until he fell asleep and quite a bit longer. My mother knew what was going on, but she felt helpless as I did at the time. He got up, grumbling something as he walked into the bedroom to go to sleep on the bed. So after we hung up, I stayed awake with a blanket on the couch covering everything but my eyes, while listening to him breathe, until dawn, when I finally fell asleep. There was another time, around 4 p.m. We needed some groceries for dinner, so I got the girls ready and left my baby boy asleep in his playpen in the living room. Opal was napping at the dining room table, and my Bill was sitting on the edge of our bed in the room. I yelled out to him that I was leaving and to keep an ear out for the baby, but he didn't respond, so I repeated myself. I heard him mutter, "Yeah." So we left. The store didn't have something his mother wanted, so I had to go to 2 stores. It had just gotten dark. As we pulled up, I could hear the baby crying. I rushed in and his mother was still sitting at the table. I picked up my son, and he was soaking wet, and it looked like he had been crying for a while. I was changing his diaper trying to calm him down, and the whole time Opal was getting mad at me for leaving her alone with the baby. I was furious. I told her, "I didn't. I left him with your son." She looked surprised. She didn't even know he was home. What the hell? Where was he? I put my son down and told the girls to play with him. Something wasn't right. I didn't think he was still in the bedroom because the lights were off, but someone was in there. It was abnormally dark. I slowly went up to the door and walked in. There was a dim light coming in through a crack in the blinds, and I saw his silhouette still sitting on the bed. He hadn't moved. His feet were on the floor, and he was slightly hunched forward with his elbows resting on his legs, cupping his hands together. The room smelled stuffy and thick, like sweat. I called out his name, but he didn't reply. Once again, I called his name, adding, "You're scaring me." I moved closer, saying, "Why aren't you answering me?" I saw he was sweating and that it was glistening in the light and dripping from his head to his hands and then his hands to the floor. I could hear it as it dripped. I was shaking while I slowly made my way around to the lamp, and I heard a growl that almost sounded like it was coming from the floorboards. I turned the lamp on. His shirt was soaking wet. There was a pool of sweat at his feet and his eyes were darker than I've ever seen them, and his stare was fixated down. I was afraid to get near him, but I felt he needed my help. I started to shake him while I called out his name. He was cold to the touch. I crouched down in front of him between his legs, but honestly, I wanted to run out of that room. I took his face in my shaking hands and with a quiver in my voice I said, "Please, Bill." Just like that, he snapped out of it. He grabbed both my wrists and hurled me onto the bed behind him. He said with a loud voice, "What are you doing, you freak?" And then he got up and went to the bathroom. I heard him turn on the shower as I lay there curled up, not knowing what just happened. I soon composed myself and went out to bring the groceries in and make dinner. Later, he joined us as if nothing ever happened, but I still felt uneasy. The night went on, and he was his old self goofing off with the kids and watching cartoons. I went to the kitchen and started washing dishes with my back to the hall. I heard him in the living room with the kids. I heard him. The next thing I knew, he was behind me, and he aggressively grabbed my waist and put his mouth on me. I could feel his teeth on my neck. I jumped. He startled me, then he looked at me like he wanted me dead, and said, "You disgust me," and left the house. I don't know where he went. I didn't ask. All I know is that he was gone. He came back later that next morning, dirty and saying something about him getting lost in the desert. I remember him telling me once that I could scream out there, and no one would hear me. We eventually got out of that house after living through horror, not knowing from day to day what was going to happen next, and who was safe from that evil. Later, after his mother moved into her daughter's house, she passed away. I felt bad because I wasn't sad. I found a way to leave Bill. I made an excuse that I needed to pick up a check from the welfare department, and I had to bring the kids with me. After I was there, I told them I was being abused, and they helped me find a safe place to go. After I didn't return that day, a detective from the sheriff's department came and asked me questions about him, because apparently he stole a child and took her to that empty house. Thank God he was caught before he could do anything to her. I never let him hurt my children, but sadly, they remember him hurting me. For years after, I would have nightmares of him appearing at the foot of my bed, clawing his way up my legs, closing the space between our faces with his cold breath on my lips. And those eyes. I would wake up gasping for air. About 9 years ago, I looked up his name and found him on a website exposing predators. I still shiver when I see small mirrors or broken glass. A few years after we moved out, I ran into the former renter, so I asked her if she knew anything about a little boy ever living there, or did someone die? And she said, now this is not fact. She heard, I don't know where, that there was a boy and his mother disappeared, leaving him with his stepdad, who was horribly abusive to him. Later, the boy was found stuffed in a hole on the property dead, and they found the stepfather's dried and decayed body on the couch in the living room. He had committed suicide. I don't know if that's true, but it seemed pretty close to what I felt. I wish even now that I could have helped that sweet little boy move on. We couldn't even drive down that street for years after that, and we all cried with relief many years later when we found out that the house had been demolished to the ground and a housing tract was built over the land. I still wonder if those people living there are plagued by the evil that live there. Also, please keep in mind this isn't supposed to be a scary story. These are my experiences and my encounters. I'm here to share my story, not try and scare anyone with silly made-up stuff. Thank you for reading. Story 2. Until She Came Over. Before I moved into the house in Palmdale, California, my daughter, 2 dogs, myself, and a longtime friend all lived in an extended van. Yes, I was homeless. I had my eye on this house that was vacant for a long time and needed some repair. I made a deal with the owner that in lieu of a deposit, I would do all the work and repairs to live there. It was a small but spacious older house with 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a big courtyard patio with a detached garage and laundry room. It was very blue inside. The colour. The first day we were there, my daughter and her friend were painting our bedrooms separately, and all of us saw what looked like a shadow, in broad daylight, of a short, hooded form that felt like a female. The floors in the entire house were ceramic tile, so I could hear what sounded like bare feet slapping on the floor as she ran away down the hall. I ran into my daughter's room and said, "Was that one of you?" When they said no, I told her to stop working, and we all sat in the van and called the owner. There was no way I was going to do this again. He told me he did not know the history of the house, but he was desperate to keep a renter in there, so being he was a priest, he would come and bless the house. And he did. Nothing really happened after that, at least not to me. A few cold chills, strange noises, maybe the feeling you were being watched and an occasional name being called out, but nothing really creepy. I do know that in the 10 years I was there, I switched rooms to accommodate anyone briefly staying with us, and every time I did, the kids would all say that my room was always warmer than the others, despite not having a heater. Like I moved out, the room would get cold. Never thought much about it. About 7 years ago, my mother and sister were disabled and lived pretty far away, but they were having an annual housing inspection and needed us to come and clean. The kids and I were going to drive over there, but we needed someone to watch over the dogs for about a week. My stepdaughter, being homeless at the time, asked me if she could do it, but she wanted to get paid to stay there. I agreed. But I knew she dabbled in witchcraft. I also knew that she didn't know what she was doing in that area. You would have to know this person to understand. She even paid $40 for a big bag of fairy dust. Really? So no, I didn't trust her not to bring something dark into my home. I told her she could stay just as long as she promised not to practice any witchcraft there. She promised, but she wanted to know if she could at least bring her tarot cards. Now, I didn't say anything wrong with that, so I said yes. What she failed to mention was that she uses a pendulum in her tarot reading. 3 days later, she called me saying that she is no longer at the house. The dogs are alone, that I have to make other arrangements because she is not going back. When I asked her why, she told me that my place had become extremely cold after the second night. Things kept crashing in the kitchen. The dogs were freaking out, and she saw what looked like a little girl in the hall. Experiencing all that, she said she was not scared of her as much as what she saw outside. It was the image of a human-like creature crawling towards her on the side of the laundry room wall outside. Seeing that my dogs were all alone, I raced home only to find the house in disarray and the dogs all hiding under my bed. After that, my son started to see things in his room. He saw the little girl, and she came to him in his dreams. He kept complaining about my granddaughter running in his home and then back down the hall. But my granddaughter was asleep. My son is a realist. Rather than jumping to the conclusion of the paranormal, he, like me, always tries to debunk before he reacts. He never wanted to go to the laundry room outside because he saw and described the thing crawling on the side of the wall. He said it was as if you took a human body and stretched its limbs and turned it black with reflective eyes, and then it was crawling on the side of the wall like a spider. It took us a while, but the house was eventually cleansed. But the night before we moved, we were all so tired from packing. My son was in his room with the door open and was fast asleep. He said that the little girl appeared standing there in his dream with a bag on her head. He thought it was his sister or niece being weird, so he leaned over and pulled it off. But there was another bag on her head. It was a few times of doing this before he said that the girl grabbed his wrist and gripped tightly before pointing to the window behind him. He didn't want to look at what he might see, but when he did, there was nothing. He looked back at her. She was gone. That's when he woke up gasping for air and feeling his wrist. It was still cold. He asked his sister if she came into his room that night, and she told him that she was cleaning the kitchen. All in all, that house was good to us for the most part. I feel like it was what we needed at that time in our lives. We helped a lot of people get on their feet in that house. Thank you for watching and/or listening to this video. Again, if you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit the like button. And if you don't already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and select the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my future uploads. Also, please leave a comment on this video letting me know what you thought of it. Comments really help with the YouTube algorithm and will really help my channel to grow. If you have a story you would like me to narrate, please email it to me at stories@daredeverall.com. I recently passed 50,000 subscribers to this channel, so I'm halfway to my next major milestone. Thank you to everyone who is continuing to subscribe to this channel and contributing to its growth by liking videos and leaving comments. Once I get to 100,000 subscribers, my plan is to reward you all with an epic video with over 3 hours of original content. If that is the sort of thing you want to hear, please keep helping this channel to grow. If you want to support my channel even further, there are a number of ways you can do so. You can consider leaving me a tip for this video via my PayPal. Link is included in the description. Check out my Teespring store and consider purchasing one of my shirt designs. Or head over to Audible. There is a book, Punch, by J.R. Park that I narrated. I do get a small royalty if you decide to purchase that. It's a revenge/horror novel that was a lot of fun to narrate. Thanks again.